The Phil Naessens Show is on in five, four, three, two, one.
Welcome to the Phil Naessens Show. I'm happy to have you here. We've got a great show planned for you today. Up first, Zeb Benbrook will be here to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder New York Knicks game, and I'll probably go on a very big rant. Later on, Eric Stephen from True Blue LA will be here to talk LA Dodgers baseball, followed by Aaron Stampler to talk about the Spurs and to answer your questions. But up first, from WelcomeToLoudCity.com, please welcome Zeb Benbrook to the show. Zeb, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to have you here. We're having some technical difficulties here today, so I have to figure some things out, but we're doing our best. Anyway, the Oklahoma City Thunder laid the boots to the New York Knicks once again by 12. They won, and I don't know if it was that close.
Yeah, it was a really, really not competitive game. I mean, it was just like earlier in the year, except Oklahoma City had Russell Westbrook that time, so the blowout was even more significant. I mean, this was an interesting game because the Knicks had just come off of kind of a successful streak in January. I mean, they had like a successful streak earlier on in the month, and then they kind of trailed off a little bit. But, I mean, there's just no knowing what to expect with these New York Knicks. I mean, they just signed a bunch of erratic players who aren't going to perform for you every single night. And I think we saw that with Carmelo Anthony. I mean, he's not going to give you over 40% performances all the time. I mean, he's not really a true superstar in that sense because he can't pass and he takes up so much of the offense that it's hard telling exactly how efficient he is and how beneficial to the team he is because he gets just as many turnovers as he does assists. So, I mean, and in that game, he was missing makeable shots. I mean, he was not getting double teamed by the Thunder at all. He was just going up head to head against Durant and Cephalosha, and he couldn't produce. And then, that's always going to kill your team. I mean, the rest of the team was there. The rest of the team was competitive for most of the game, and Anthony just didn't show up. And I mean, that has happened. That's been the story for the Knicks all season. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking when they got their personnel. I mean, I'll get into that later, but it was a thorough stomping.
Oh, it certainly was. The score was not indicative of what really happened because that's exactly what it was, a stomping. Carmelo Anthony, the night before that, he had 41 points, and he only had 1 assist. Now, in this basketball game, he had 15 points and 5 assists and 7 rebounds, so he was at least dropping a few dimes, but he's not making them any better, and I think it's time for him to go. I think they need to trade him. And they need to trade Tyson Chandler, and they need to get rid of Raymond Felton, and they probably will have to get rid of Iman Shumpert in order to get rid of the other two. And I think they need to just start all over again. And J.R. Smith, too. J.R. Smith, I don't know what his deal is. He is not the same player he was last season. He's been horrid ever since he threw that elbow at Jason Terry in the playoffs. It's just unbelievable what happened to this team who won 54 games last season. I don't get it. I mean, there's plenty of reasons why. You name most of them. But when you watch them from the outside looking in, it's almost amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just the way I think what most amazes me is the fact that we thought that this team was going to work in the first place. I mean, you just look at the players and their history. I mean, you had Carmelo Anthony. I mean, he's one of the most questionable superstars in terms of, in terms of how well he performs defensively and in passing the ball and things like that. So you always had to take a risk there. Andrea Bargnani was a huge risk. I mean, he's the team's second leading scorer in terms of points per game, even though he's injured right now. But he's proven to us that he can't have a consistent season. He'll have 10 or 11 really good games, and the rest of the games will be a wash and he'll play garbage defense. J.R. Smith, as you said, there's a difference between being immature and, trying to have fun and, be a kid sometimes. I mean, he's just immature. He's not, he doesn't have that base level discipline that you need to play in the NBA. Raymond Felton had a huge amount of problems when he left Portland 2 seasons ago. I mean, people thought that he was a team cancer. Amari Stoudemire came to New York because he got a huge, huge, huge contract. I mean, you just go down the line of all those players. Even Jeremy Tyler had a questionable history. Meta World Peace. I mean, you just grabbed the biggest collection of question marks in the entire NBA and expected it to work, and it just doesn't work. I mean, you've got to get guys who are consistent, reliable producers, and they hardly have any of those on this team.
And that's exactly right. Now, people say it's because they don't have anyone to help Carmelo, but Carmelo doesn't help himself very much, and he certainly doesn't help anyone else. Okay, he did in Oklahoma City because he had no choice, but it was an embarrassing thing to watch, and it was, if you're a Knicks fan, you have to almost shake your head. And what I don't understand is why on earth Mike Woodson still has a job. I just cannot figure out how in the world he keeps his job. Maurice Cheeks was fired the other day, and his record was much better than the Knicks is, and I just don't get it. And I will never understand James Dolan. And we know when he threw away the cheerleaders, that was just plain stupid. And then he goes and puts this collection of ragtag misfits together and expects a championship. And that, Zeb, is what he expected at the beginning of the season. He said, I don't expect anything less than a championship run. The only championship run they're going to make is probably on the 4th of July when they go to Coney Island and get into the Naessens hot dog eating contest, because you got nothing but a bunch of ganj smoking idiots, man. And I think they just need to bust this team up, starting with Carmelo Anthony, because I don't care what he says. At the end of the day, he can't stick around New York. They're going to crucify him if he doesn't win a championship. Get rid of him first. Get rid of Tyson Chandler. Send him to a team that could use a defensive center who can afford him, and start over. Scrap this heap and start over. That's what I think they should do.
Well, I think one interesting thing I would like to ask you is, since the Knicks are a team that has so much money and an owner that is willing to spend so much money, do you think that they should try to go rebuild through the lottery and get draft picks and do the typical thing, or do you think that they should go the big team route and maybe stay not competitive for a year but use free agency and that money to be competitive right away again?
Well, spending money is not an issue for them because they have the highest paid front court in the
Yeah, yeah.
NBA.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. I mean, do you think that they should try to rebuild like a small market team might, or do you think that they should just try right to compete again like 2 years from now with the money that they've got?
Well, I don't think that the fan base will sit back and wait for a lottery pick. And David Stern's not there to fix it this year. So the last time they got one. So I would have to say that they have to go through the free agent route. Hopefully what they can do, though, what my thinking is to build around Tim Hardaway Jr. He would be the rookie of the year if he got some minutes, but Mike Woodson doesn't play him enough. And he's the only shining star in the whole freaking team. But honestly, if they can dump Carmelo Anthony and Tyson Chandler for a few picks, probably Shumpert can get you something too. I don't think you could get a bag of donuts for Raymond Felton right now, but I'm sure Raymond would probably eat them on the way to the flight. But honestly, they're just awful. This Jeremy Tyler, hey, he had a nice ball game. Amari Stoudemire, you couldn't get rid of him at gunpoint. So you're going to have to build around Tim Hardaway Jr. Meta World Peace, I wish they would have played him more. They just didn't. And it's disappointing because there were nights when he played really well. But to answer your question, they can't wait around for a lottery. What they need to do is go to the free agent route. Hopefully they get some picks for these guys if they decide to move them. And then from there, build. And use that money that they have, and they have a lot of it, by the way. Obviously, they're shelling it out to a bunch of has-beens. and shell it out to a couple decent basketball players. And perhaps a Lance Stevenson, for example. And get some guys in here who actually want to win and who want to listen. And hopefully they take that money also and get themselves a coach who can handle it. Because Mike Woodson is not the coach for this basketball team. He never was. Last year, obviously, was a fluke. They made a lot of shots, and that's why they got as far as they did. But they need a coach who understands the game a little better as a head coach. And I don't think Mike Woodson does.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely don't think so either. And I think that they're just kind of a Showtime team. I mean, they really, they're a team that always has a big spotlight on them. but they're a team that's historic for making just horrible decisions. I mean, they've had the tools to win for 13 years now. I mean, not for 13 years, forever. And they haven't had a championship level team since the 90s, and that's kind of a joke. I mean, it's, just considering the amount of money that they've had to spend. I mean, the Bucks are really bad, and they're kind of a complete joke of where they are, but they didn't have the resources that the Knicks had. They didn't consistently make the bad decisions that the Knicks did. I mean, they need to get some low profile guys, some guy who could, be, really, be kind of a good personality and a role model to this team. I mean, Jeremy Lin did kind of have the opportunity to be that. I mean, he hasn't been the star that he thought he would be, but why do you let that guy go? I mean, that was one of the biggest positive things you had going for your team. And, you just jettisoned him because you didn't want to pay him that amount of money. I mean, it's, they've got to do things to improve their PR like that to, keep some sort of positive energy going. And I agree with you about Tim Hardaway Jr. I think that he's probably the best thing this team has going for it right now, and that they just kind of need to get a whole locker room atmosphere change. And I think that you're right in saying that they're not going to be able to rebuild through the draft. Nobody's going to wait for it. I mean, we're just going to, sit here and wait a couple of years and hope that they can do it. But I mean, I don't think that they're going to do anything different because Jim Dolan's done this song and dance before. He's going to release people. You're going to have probably a couple or two quagmire seasons, and then you're going to have like 3 or 4 more seasons that are going to be a failed experiment because you're going to buy players that want to come for money and don't want to come to play. And, you're going to have another Carmelo Anthony at the helm who just wants to score, and it's not going to work out. I mean, it's just kind of a vicious cycle. I don't see them getting out of it anytime soon.
No, it's going to be tough, but they have the money to do it. And the problem is they don't spend it wisely. I mean, you can go back to the Isaiah Thomas days, and you can see what they do. And then Stephen Marbury,
Oh, yeah.
bringing Stephen Marbury in there because Isaiah said he's going to be the next best thing to slice bread. And you've got smart people there. Allen Houston is a smart basketball guy. And it's all James Dolan's team, and you can tell he makes some crazy decisions. He interferes a little bit more than he should. And it's just a tough situation all the way around. I mean, before they traded for Carmelo Anthony, that team was really headed somewhere. Raymond Felton was playing nice basketball then because he was hungry, you see, and he had a coach who was point guard friendly, and it made a difference. Jeremy Lin, the same thing. He had a coach who was point guard friendly. He hasn't come even close to what he did in New York. I don't think that he would have continued to do that in New York either. I think what you see is what you get with Jeremy Lin. But they figured, well, we're bringing Ray back, and Ray's going to play good. Well, Ray hasn't played consistently good in a while. He's played some good games. He had a decent basketball game against Oklahoma City the other night. But those are few and far between. You can't have that in your point guard, and that's a big issue. And I like to lump this all on Mike Woodson, but I really can't because he can only do what he can do. But his defensive switches are just ridiculous. I mean, that's the stuff you do in high school. You don't do that in the NBA. You don't do that in win. And the ISO, it's the same thing. You win in regular season games with ISO, but you don't win playoff games with ISO. They can't seem to win regular season games. They've lost 4 of the last 5. I mean, they're just really bad. You've got the big question mark hanging over your head with Carmelo Anthony. And quite honestly, it's just ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. Blow it up, Jimmy. Blow it up and start over. It wouldn't be the first time he's done it, and it probably won't be the last either.
Yeah. I mean, when you're going to like you made a good point. When you're going to strategies like that, when you're just going to things like isolations on offense, and you're going to switches on defense, and you're just kind of trying cheap tactics like that, it just kind of reflects a lot about your coaching. I mean, you don't have. Kevin Durant is at his most effective when you're passing him the ball, because I'm a Thunder writer. I watch the Thunder all the time. When you get him the ball in the right spot and he scores. Carmelo Anthony, you never get him the ball in the right spot and he scores. He has to dribble the ball up. He has to fight defense. He has to, get up and just waste that energy. I mean, it's just bad coaching. I mean, it just shows how undisciplined they are when you run them these really basic plays, and there's no complexity to it. There's no, harmony to your strategy. I mean, it's just, he's lost control of his team. I mean, it's obvious at how the guys are acting, and they're going to be really inconsistent. I mean, this team has the talent to be top seed in the East. I mean, there's no question about it. They've done it before. They've competed with the best teams in the league, but they just can't compete every night because they're not disciplined. And I mean, that's the big story here because, they've got the talent to win.
Yep, they sure do. The problem is they just, I don't know, it's a combination of things that I've already gone over 1,000 times. Zeb, great stuff today. Thank you so much for being on the show and helping me rant on my team, my Knicks, bummers. Anyway, you can find Zeb over at welcometoloudcity.com. Coming up next, Eric Stephen from TrueBlueLA.com will be phoning in from spring training in Arizona to talk Dodger baseball. And we'll be right back. You're listening to The Phil Naessens Show.
The Phil Naessens Show will return.
And it's the reason Al Gore invented the internet.
After these brief messages.
Do you know your fantasy sports? Would you like to make money at it? DraftStreet.com and The Phil Naessens Show would like to help you get started making money playing fantasy sports today. And we'll even give you the chance to get started making money today for free. On me. That's right. All you have to do is head on over to PhilNaessens.com or visit the show notes for this show. Click the Draft Street image at the top of the page and start making money playing fantasy sports at DraftStreet.com today.
If you like baseball, you should be checking out baseballpodcasts.net. It's one of the best places you can go on the internet to listen to independent baseball talk shows. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on our radio player that can be heard around the world. So won't you tune in and give us a listen at baseballpodcasts.net. You can also listen to the great Phil Naessens Show here. See you there at baseballpodcasts.net.
Are you looking to escape into lands full of fantasy, drama, and adventure? If you are, why not try author Kay Medder's books? Their journey begins, Journey to Freedom, The Night of the Dixie Wilds, On Top of the Rainbow, and Transcendence will get you there. Kay Medder's books are available as an ebook or in paperback, and you can find her at authorkmedder.com. That's authorkmeador.com.
Riveting talk radio.
Everybody get up.
People cannot get away from the internet.
Well, I think it probably comes from porn as well. You know what I mean? That's got to be a big, strong thing.
Oh, that's gross. That's disgusting.
And it freaks me out.
My cheeks are sealed.
We love talk radio.
Bend over, baby.
Do you see what I'm saying?
WeirdTalkSuperstation.com.
Better than sex.
I don't know how good sex is.
We're going to do a lot of drinking.
Talk radio. Bend over, baby. That was great.
Brewtown Sports is your source for Brewers news and notes. Join Mr. Brewtown as he keeps you up to date on all the happenings of your Milwaukee Brewers and Major League Baseball. Follow the show on Facebook and Twitter, Brewtown Sports. Listen 24/7 at BrewtownSports.podomatic.com.
Hi, this is Phil Naessens from This Week in Tennis and The Phil Naessens Show. Max Sports Channels offers the best in sports talk radio, as well as great music 24 hours a day. It's my daily destination, and I hope it's yours. The sports talk begins each and every day at 3 p.m. and it ends around 9 p.m. Special programming on the weekends, and in between all that, the hottest music on the internet. That's Max Sports Channels. Make it your daily destination.
You're listening to AFR, the Armed Forces Radio Network.
And now, back to the Phil Naessens Show.
What a dope. What a maroon.
What is this? What's going on here? What are you people doing here?
Welcome back to the Phil Naessens Show. The Los Angeles Dodgers made a historic run last season after so many injuries and so many questions, and after so many millions and millions of dollars spent. They're back again this season. They seem healthy, And joining me to talk all about that and more, please welcome from True Blue LA, Eric Stephen is in the house. Eric, how you doing? Welcome to the show. It's nice to finally get you back on the show, my friend.
Yeah, doing great, Phil. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. The Dodgers, who's new this year? Who do we look for new that we haven't seen before?
The biggest name is still a little bit of a mystery to most of us, is Alex Guerrero, second baseman they signed out of Cuba. They gave him a 4-year, $28 million deal. He's going to be 27 this year. But the problem is he hasn't played, in Cuba for a little over a year. And then he was limited by hamstring injury in the Winter League. He only played 12 games. So while he's sort of the favorite to win the second base job going into the spring, there's a lot of question marks. He's a natural, or was a natural shortstop, although many scouts don't believe he could play short in the big leagues. He's going to be at second base, so it's sort of a new position for him. And then also whether his bat's going to translate. But he's the favorite to win the job, but I think we're sort of anxious. He's in camp early. The position players don't report till later this week, but until we get sort of our eyes on him and see him play, in actual games, it's going to be hard to evaluate. But so far, so good, I guess.
Absolutely. Now, he's a shortstop. And then there's another kid, too, named Rojas, right?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. His name's been thrown around quite a bit. I think he's sort of one of the, I don't know how to describe it. I'd say like a fallback option. He's not on the 40-man roster. He's a minor leaguer. He didn't hit much in Double-A last year, but his strength is his defense. So if they decided to go a different direction at second, and maybe a couple guys were hurt or something, he's pretty far down the pecking order. But he would be a defense first. Sort of a specialist, and probably not going to give them much offensively. So I think he'd be a long shot. But he's one of the guys in camp as well.
Yeah, so you have two fantastic shortstops trying to play second base. Will you miss Skip Schumacher?
I think so. That's one of the unique things about this year's team. Last year going into the season, they had a lot of their bench pretty much all signed, like Skip Schumacher, Nick Punto, Jerry Hairston, Juan Uribe, who didn't have a starting job heading into the season. He was on the bench. It seemed like their bench was pretty much set. Now it's full of like wide open battles. They didn't really sign anyone to replace Punto and Schumacher. They don't have a lot of depth there. So you basically have like D. Gordon, and then speaking of shortstops playing second, I think second base is going to be his primary position. If Guerrero doesn't win the job, Gordon is probably the next guy in line. At the very least, Gordon probably is going to win a spot on the bench as a utility guy. He played a little bit of outfield in the Winter Leagues, but mostly second base. So they're looking at him as sort of a utility fill-in guy. They have multiple positions. They have Justin Turner on a minor league deal, filling a little at third, second, and short. Same with Sean Figgins, he didn't play last year. He was very bad in the previous 2 years, but if he shows anything, he's another possibility. So there's a lot of sort of open bench spots that'll be up for grabs this year. So that's going to be probably the most interesting position battle during camp.
Yeah, I think so. Now, health was a big issue last season. Now, what's the health status of Hanley Ramirez, for example? How's he doing?
As all reports I've heard on Hanley, he's not in camp yet, but he will be in a couple days. All reports on Hanley's that he's doing good and he's going to be ready to go, right away. He had the broken ribs from the NLCS. He was dealing with a nerve issue in his back at the end of the year, and then just sort of, I think just general wear and tear on his body. He was pretty beat up at the end of last year. But all reports I've heard is that he's healthy, but you have another, bunch of other sort of question marks coming in, namely, Matt Kemp, that, we keep talking about the Dodgers having, 4 outfielders vying for 3 spots, but as of now, Kemp is still not running, outside. He's running in one of these like specialized treadmills that stimulates running. It's sort of, release pressure on the ankle. he's recovering from both shoulder and ankle surgeries this offseason. The shoulder is fine. He's been able to lift weights. He actually looks bigger. So that's a good sign. But as of right now, he can't run, and he's probably not going to be ready for those opening 2 games in Australia. But they're looking like hoping he's ready like first week, maybe second week in April.
Yeah, Kemp scares the bejesus out of me because he missed most of the season last year. And, man, without a healthy Kemp, what does that outfield look like?
Well, then it's basically what they had last year, which would be, Puig, Yasiel Puig in right. And you'd probably have to put Andre Ethier in center and then Carl Crawford in left. But they would prefer, Kemp obviously healthy, and then they figured out from there. But I would say if Kemp is healthy, and obviously it's a big if given the last 2 seasons, Kemp and Puig would sort of find their way into the most playing time of those 4, and then you sort of mix and match with Crawford and Ethier, although it's difficult because both are left-handed. But I think they're going to be conservative and maybe give Kemp a little extra rest than he might normally get, just because he has been so beat up the last couple of years. And then Puig, while he's young and durable, he plays with such a reckless style that I think he's going to benefit a little bit from extra days off here and there too. So it's not the most ideal situation, but they'll find a way if they keep them all around that all 4 of those outfielders will get some significant playing time.
Yeah, because I read somewhere where people were calling Andre Ethier the odd man out, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't think so. I think the Dodgers learned something last year. You can't count on anything. And speaking of injuries, last season when we talked at this time, there were 8 starting pitchers in camp.
Yep.
It went down to 2. This year on my cheat sheet, now you tell me how far I'm off. I got Clayton Kershaw, Zach Greinke, Hyun-Jin Ryu, Danny Herron, and Josh Beckett. And I have a question mark next to Beckett's name. What's his status health-wise?
Yeah, he showed up to camp on Monday. He is coming off of, I forget what the surgery is called. His condition was thoracic outlet syndrome, which is basically his nerve was getting pinched or sort of cut off. It was near his, in the back of his, shoulder area. And it wasn't, he was getting numbness and tightness in his fingers. So while he said it didn't cause him pain to throw, he had no feel for the throw. So basically he was tentative in fear that he might either hit somebody or just not have any control whatsoever. So he did not pitch effectively. He was limited to 8 starts last year. Then he did have the surgery. He's supposed to be ready full bore to start spring training. He pitched a bullpen session on Monday and it was okay. But I think he slots into the number 5 slot. I think the Dodgers don't really need a 5th starter till like mid-April, so they're going to take their time with Beckett, let him go at a slower pace during the spring. But also they gave themselves a little bit of insurance. They signed Paul Maholm on Saturday, which was the day that pitchers and catchers reported to camp. He was a new guy in camp. They gave him a 1-year deal, $1.5 million, and he with a bunch of incentives. So if Beckett's not ready, Mahomes with subs in as the 5th starter. But if Beckett is ready, then Maholm is probably going to end up as like the long man in relief, and sort of give them a little extra in the bullpen. But so they try to give themselves a little insurance, and then down the road, they as a starter, they also had Chad Billingsley coming off Tommy John. All indications with him is that maybe late May at the absolute best, but most likely sometime in June he'll be back on some level. So that's what they're looking at. They'll have a little bit more options as the season wears on, hopefully.
Yeah, I think you're right, hopefully, because last year, holy moly, I have never seen anything like what happened last year, I swear. And I never saw anything like what the Dodgers did after everyone started to get healthy. That was incredible. Now, Zach Greinke, what are you expecting from him this season? I don't even want to talk about Clayton Kershaw because we all know what he's going to do.
Yeah, I think with Greinke, he was so good in the second half. He was, as good as Kershaw was. Really, in the second half, he his ERA was under 2 for his last, I think it was like 16 starts or something, and he carried that into the playoffs and did really well. I think for him, they would just like him to be fully healthy the whole year. Last year, he was dealing with some nagging things during the spring, and then like 2 starts in, he broke his collarbone, which obviously set him back. He made 28 starts last year, and he was very effective, especially once he was fully recovered from the collarbone. But if they could count on him for like 32, 33 starts and a full season, maybe they can get 200 plus innings, maybe 220 instead of say the 180. Then they're going to be extremely happy with what they get. But I think he's going to be that the same thing, that 1A, number 2 guy behind Kershaw, and give them probably the most formidable 1-2 punch in baseball, if not at least the National League, I think.
I think you're right. And I was reading somewhere else the other day about Rue, and people are saying, is he going to avoid the sophomore slump or the sophomore curse? What do you think about Rue? I think he's going to have a breakout year this year.
Yeah, I think, it's reasonable to think that he might have a little bit of regression. He was really good and exceeded expectations last year. So even if he sort of takes a step back, he's still a very effective pitcher. But to his credit, he came into camp a little heavy last year. So this year he actually put in the work and showed up to camp lighter. He wouldn't say how much, but it's I would imagine it's 10 to 15 pounds lighter. So he's in much better shape. Trying to get a head start on where he was at this time last year, and he's been on the mound, specifically trying to get his off-speed stuff earlier this year than he did last year. So if he can sort of keep that work ethic going, and we start out the gate a little bit stronger, then all bets are off. But he was very impressive last year. I was very impressed with him, and I'm not worried one way or the other. Even if he does take a little bit of a step back, he's still a very, very effective number 3 guy.
Well, he came in a little heavy because his pockets were full.
That's right, yeah, exactly.
He broke in the bank. But Dan Herron, another new Dodger, he had a tough time in Washington. His record was not so great, but then I guess, he missed the West Coast. What are you looking for from Dan Herron? Because 4.67 ERA last season was a little bit high for him.
Yeah, that's another thing. He was such a good, sort of a horse in innings, front of the rotation, innings eater guy for, so many years, Arizona, with the Angels too. But yeah, last year he definitely struggled, but I think it's mostly is the case with pitchers. Dodgers are sort of betting on health. Last year he had some trouble early in the year, was giving up a ton of home runs, didn't have a good feel for the ball. Spent a little bit of time middle of the year on the disabled list, and I think the rest sort of did him well. They're banking on what he did in the second half, which was much more impressive. He kept his home runs down. He kept the ball down on his throwing plane, and he's hoping to carry that over into this season. He's probably going to benefit a little bit from moving over to, say, pitching half his games at Dodger Stadium. He by most accounts, took less money to come to the Dodgers, so seems motivated to sort of pitch for, I guess, relatively close, like his hometown team. He said when he grew up, he split time between the Dodgers and the Angels, but he's home, happy to be here. I think they're going to get a pretty motivated guy this year, and hope, like I said, if he's healthy, then he's going to be effective. If not, then it's going to have to go a different direction.
I'll tell you what, it all sounds great, man. It's great having you on the show. Thanks again for being here, Eric. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, Phil. Anytime.
All right, that was Eric Stephen, and you can find him over at TrueBlueLA.com. Coming up next, Aaron Stampler and I will be taking a look at the San Antonio Spurs and answering your questions that you wanted answered about the Spurs. And we'll be right back. You're listening to The Phil Naessens Show.
The Phil Naessens Show will return.
And it's the reason Al Gore invented the Internet.
After these brief messages.
Hi, Hi, this is Phil Naessens from This Week in Tennis and the Phil Naessens Show. Max Sports Channels offers the best in sports talk radio, as well as great music 24 hours a day. It's my daily destination, and I hope it's yours. The sports talk begins each and every day at 3 p.m. and ends around 9 p.m. Special programming on the weekends. And in between all that, the hottest music on the internet. That's Max Sports Channels. Make it your daily destination.
Hi, this is Gary Mack of Mets Musings, and I hope you'll join me each and every week as I recap all of the comings and goings on in New York Mets baseball. I'll have guests on from all across Mets Nation, giving their insights and analysis on the New York Mets. And you can follow me on Twitter at Mets Musings 1, as well as on Facebook. The group name is Mets Musings. So tune in weekly to the Mets Musings, available at MetsMusings.com, Stitcher.com, iTunes.com, iHeartRadio, and of course, BaseballTalkRadio.com, the home of great baseball talk shows.
Riveting talk radio.
Everybody get up. People cannot get away from the internet.
Well, I think it probably comes from porn as well. You know what I mean? That's got to be a big, strong thing.
Oh, that's gross. That's disgusting.
And it freaks me out.
My cheeks are sealed.
We love talk radio.
Bend over, baby.
Do you see what I'm saying?
WeirdTalkSuperstation.com.
Better than sex.
I don't know how good sex is.
We're going to do a lot of drinking.
Dog radio. Bend over, baby. That was great.
Are you a fan of historical fiction? If you are, then why not try author Mary Ann Bernal's The Briton and the Dane series of historical fiction novels. You can purchase these novels from her website at www.mariannebernal.com. That's www.mariannebernal.com. Do you know your fantasy sports? Would you like to make money at it? DraftStreet.com and the Phil Naessens Show would like to help you get started making money playing fantasy sports today. And we'll even give you the chance to get started making money today for free. On me. That's right. All you have to do is head on over to PhilNaessens.com or visit the show notes for this show. Click the Draft Street image at the top of the page and start making money playing fantasy sports at DraftStreet.com today.
You're listening to AFR, the Armed Forces Radio Network.
And now, back to the Phil Naessens Show.
Now here it is, your moment of zen.
Welcome back to the Phil Naessens Show. The San Antonio Spurs are limping along, and their record looks like they are. They've lost to some very interesting teams. They haven't put a full unit together in quite some time. And here to talk all about that and more, please welcome, from PoundingTheRock.com, Aaron Stampler is in the house. Aaron, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. What's going on with the Spurs, man? They took it on the chin on the road. They're on the rodeo road trip right now. I can't even speak today for some reason. But they lost to the Pistons, who just recently fired their coach. What is going on with the Spurs?
What's going on with them is seemingly their only healthy player is 37-year-old Tim Duncan, and your 37-year-old should never be your healthiest player at any point of the season. And I mean, obviously they're missing a number of guys in Manu Ginobili and Kawhi Leonard, and that's bad enough. That hurts you bad enough. But then on top of it, you know, Danny Green, he hurt his hand again. like his knuckle. It's not serious, but he hurt it. Thiago Splitter has missed the last 2 games with a calf injury, and Thiago is not the guy you want to be missing against a big Detroit team, a big physical Detroit team, where the size is really their one strength. And then even Tony Parker, I mean, he's in and out of the lineup, and when he is playing, he's a shell of himself right now because he has a bad shin and probably 10 other things going on physically. And really, I suspect that if the rest of the team was healthy, that Parker would have been shelved, a couple of weeks back just to get right. And I think he needs the All-Star break as badly as anybody.
Yeah, but he's going to be playing in the All-Star game, right?
Not very many minutes. I'd be surprised. I would say the over/under on how many minutes Tony Parker plays about 6.5.
Well, that's fair enough. I would probably prefer to not see him play at all, so he's healthy when they come back, because they have a tough road to hoe still. You want to get home court advantage. We saw how important that was last season, and well, it could be interesting if they don't get healthy. Now we had some questions this week, and they're pretty good ones, I think. First one is this. As a Spurs fan, does all the resting of players make you crazy?
Well, if it's a resting of healthy players versus guys who are just simply hurt, I mean, I guess it annoys me to some degree, but I mean, I do see the end game of it. I do see the wisdom of it, especially if it's a back-to-back situation, if it's a 4th game in 5-night situation, if the opponent, might be a little inferior. If it's like, a game against Milwaukee or whatever, why would you want to play, your frontline guys when you don't have to? But, I don't think it kind of bothers me more late in the year than the beginning, just because, I do care about home court advantage. I care about it, I think, more than the Spurs care about it. I do think it's important. I think it's going to especially be vital, to beat teams like Oklahoma City or maybe even Portland or even Miami in the finals. I think home court advantage played a huge role in them losing the finals to Miami last year. And I think, on some level, they have to do whatever they can to wind up with the best record. But at the same time, I understand it's not particularly realistic with an older team to grind, so hard for 82 games, and you got to save something for the end. I just think the Spurs kind of put themselves in position where if they don't have home court, that they have to win a series in 6 games or fewer, because I just don't trust them to win a Game 7 on the road against a really, top-notch team.
Yeah, that makes sense. For me, living in Europe, we see we have one channel that does show some NBA games, but they rarely, if ever, show Spurs games. And the one time that they did was against Brooklyn, and half their team was out, and it was just a joke. And it's 4 a.m, and you're thinking, why did I stay up for this, or why did I get up early to watch this? And to me, it makes me crazy. From a fantasy standpoint, a lot of people, Aaron, listen to this show because they play fantasy basketball. It drives us absolutely nuts. Same game, I had Duncan, and I could have used his 20 points and 10 rebounds. I still won the week, but won by 1 point. And I would have won a lot easier had he have been on the floor. But I understand the rationale behind it. But yeah, I can see their point, though. It would make me crazy. I'm sure it makes a lot of people crazy out there, doesn't it? Don't you think?
I think it does. I mean, I think, the blame has to be shared. I mean, well, actually, I'm not even sure if blame is the right word. I think sometimes it's blame on the part of network executives who don't really, think ahead on these things, who don't think 2 steps ahead. And on some level, it's just bad luck. I mean, ostensibly, the Spurs and Brooklyn, that was scheduled to be a national game because, you're thinking, oh, it's going to be a matchup of Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan, 2 future Hall of Fame big guys. And who knows, this might be the last time they ever face each other because, I think Garnett's about to retire after the season's over. And, these guys have obviously had a rivalry. There's been a few reports here and there that Duncan does not care for Garnett at all, personally. And, they've had a lot of good games against one another. And so you can understand why such a game would be scheduled. And, Duncan doesn't miss really as many games as people think he does. I think he tries to play in every game. He wants to play in every game. It's Pop who sits him out more than Duncan begs out. And I think normally this would have been a game he would have played had he not had to log 40 minutes in a double overtime win against Washington the day before. But I definitely do think that people who do schedule the Spurs for national games, whether it's ESPN or whether it's TNT, that they could do a much better job of just looking at the Spurs schedule of looking at the situation and scheduling, not scheduling those games on the second night of a back-to-back on a fourth game in 5 nights on a long road trip where they're more likely to rest their frontline players. And it's just, why take that chance? Why take the chance that they're going to rest those guys? When you don't have to take that chance, why not just schedule the first game of a back-to-back rather than the second? If you want to put the Spurs on national TV. But at the same time, their situation right now with so many injuries, I mean, you can't really predict that if you're like a TV executive or whatever. You can't really predict that Parker's going to be hurt, that Ginobili's going to be hurt, that Leonard's going to be hurt. Some of that is just bad luck. But I really don't know. When Spurs do get scheduled, I really don't know how much of that is people wanting to put the Spurs on versus just feeling obligated to because they're an elite team. But I think most of the time when they're on TV, it's the other team that that gets the attention, that gets the top billing, that gets the eyeballs and the ratings and so on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, we have a question that's very similar to that, and I think partially we've answered it, but we can get into it a little deeper, is how can you watch a game knowing that the Spurs won't be putting out their best team? And do you think that's a big reason as to why the Spurs don't have as many nationally televised games as, say, some of their larger market counterparts?
Number one, I absolutely do not think that's a reason. I'd like to wish it was, but I'm realistic enough to understand that they're just not as popular as a Oklahoma City, as a Miami, New York, even bad teams like New York or the Lakers, the Celtics. They're in such big markets that they're always going to be popular. And the Clippers with Blake Griffin, Duncan all over the place, things like that. No, I don't know. I think the Spurs get the number of games nationally that they deserve, and sometimes I think they get too many just because of what we talked about with the potential resting situation. And I just I'm not dissatisfied at all with the number of national games they get. I just wish they were scheduled better, scheduled a little more smartly and more intelligently. And yeah, I've never really complained. Ever since the invent of League Pass, I've never really had an issue with the number of Spurs games on national TV, just because, I don't feel the national announcers always do a good job of talking them up when they're playing anyway. I think usually when they play, it's the other team that gets the focus, the other team's players that get the attention. The Spurs, it's always the same adjectives when national people talk about the Spurs. Oh, they're machine-like, the precision, the selflessness, the team ball, no agendas. It's always the same backhanded compliments rather than, ever really focusing on the individual brilliance of their 3 future Hall of Famers. I mean, I think Pop gets a large share of whatever attention they do get during a broadcast. Oh, that Pop, what's he going to say next? And they make this the whole industry about it. He's the only coach who's ever, had an interesting moment with a sideline reporter. And I just think it's become this own sitcom at this point. Oh, what will Pop do next? And, I think at some point Pop, plays to the camera a little bit just because it's become its own cottage industry. But besides that, the team doesn't really get analyzed any unique in a kind of unique fashion. It's always the same platitudes, the same backhanded compliments, the same adjectives. And, the individual players don't seem to get that much recognition during a broadcast. And at the halftime show, it's always the halftime show. The analysts always spend, talking about the other team. I remember watching the Miami San Antonio game a couple weeks ago, and Tim Duncan was the leading scorer of the game. 37-year-old Tim Duncan, he was the leading scorer of the game. We had 17 points or something, and the Spurs were down 5 or 6 points at halftime. And they didn't mention the Spurs once the entire halftime show. All they focused on was a couple of dunks by LeBron James, and they showed Greg Oden getting a dunk. It's like they want to give Greg Oden this participation medal for playing a couple of minutes in the game. And I just thought it was pathetic. And then Jalen Rose was on the broadcast talking about how he wanted to come out of retirement and isolate Boris Diaw one-on-one which is just absurd to me, because Boris Diaw has been a terrific defender the whole season and cooled down a number of really hot scoring big men, and he's been the team's most versatile defender this year and one of the most consistent Spurs this year because of all the injuries they've had. And so when you have analysis quote unquote like that, why would you want the team to be on a national broadcast when you could just listen to them on League Pass instead and get more of a Spurs-centric kind of view of the game.
Well, that's fair enough, but for Spurs fans, and they have a global audience because of their global basketball team, League Pass isn't as always as easy to obtain, and you have to watch it on the stream, and sometimes the stream isn't very good. So, you want to, when they are on, you want them to put out their best teams, and you want to have them on as often as you can. You have League Pass, so you have that option, but a lot of us here don't, and we have to rely on other things, and it's tough. But how do you watch them play when they don't put out their best team, though? That was the first part of the question.
Well, I guess I just don't have a choice in the matter. I mean, they don't consult me on their lineups. I just watch it. But I mean, the one comfort that I have is their record. Really doesn't seem to be. I mean, throughout the years, their record really isn't all that different. When they're missing, one guy or two guys, regardless of who those guys are. I think the only time I ever really get pessimistic going into a Spurs game is if they're really resting everybody, like the game against Brooklyn. That game going in, I kind of was like, okay, well, this is going to be a loss because Duncan was out, Ginobili was out, Parker was out, Leonard was out, even I think Splitter was out. So yeah, they were missing their 6 best players, and I don't recall situations like that too often. I mean, even games prior where Papa sat the big 3, all the other role players were in the lineup. Splitter was in the lineup, Kawhi Leonard was in the lineup, so they still had kind of a fighting chance to me. Earlier this year, the one Spurs game I've attended in person, I went to see the Spurs against the Warriors. It was the second night of a back-to-back for the Spurs, and the big 3 were out, but they still beat the Warriors on the road just because Kawhi Leonard and Thiago Splitter played well, and Boris Diaw played well, and Marco Bellinelli, and that was enough to beat this team. It was a national TV game too. It was a TNT game, and going into it, I'm sure Charles Barkley and the crew, they thought the Spurs would have lost by 25 points, but they wound up pulling the game off. And sometimes those could be the most entertaining Spurs games of the season, just because the rest of the guys kind of have this all for one for all spirit. And I think you could even see it in Pop. I think Pop loves coaching games like that where he sits his main 3 guys. I think it just kind of takes him back to his Pomona Pitzer days, the small college where he was clearly working with inferior talent to the opposition, but he still had to find a way to get it done. And I think it gets him more lively. It gets the bench guys more lively, and just I think the Spurs play a lot harder sometimes when their main guys are out. But so it can still be entertaining. It can still result in a win. But it's not the kind of thing you want to see every day. That's for sure. But every once in a while, it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, that's fair enough. From an outsider's point looking in, it's not a lot of fun to know that they're not putting their best team out there. And I understand the question. All of us have teams we follow, and if we don't see the best team out there for whatever reason, it isn't as much fun. But, when you're following as closely as you are, you really don't have that much of a choice. Anyway, great stuff today, Aaron. Thanks for being on the show with me.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And that was Aaron Stampler. You can find him over at poundingtherock.com. And that's going to wrap it up for today's Phil Naessens Show. I want to thank all of my guests, Zeb Benbrook, Eric Stephen, all the way from spring training, and Aaron Stampler. Tomorrow we're going to do we're going to talk 3 baseball teams, and I may even have a special surprise guest. A Hall of Fame basketball player may join us tomorrow night. Until then, you all take care of yourselves. Be good. And most importantly,
ladies and gentlemen, my mother thanks you, my father thanks you, my sister thanks you, and I thank you.
You just listened to a pre-recorded edition of The Phil Naessens Show. Like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at FlashTennis31. Thanks for listening, and see you tomorrow.